You kept calling it bad timing. Strange coincidences. People drifting away for no reason. But deep down, the empath always feels when something larger is moving beneath the surface. Fate does not remove people randomly. It removes them when their energy begins to silence your soul. Carl Jung once wrote that what remains unconscious controls your life. And some people survive only because you keep abandoning yourself to keep them comfortable. The separation begins quietly, a delayed message, a coldness you cannot explain, the strange exhaustion after every conversation. Your body notices before your mind does, because empaths do not lose people first. They lose pieces of themselves first. And fate watches how long you are willing to disappear for someone who would never search for you in the dark. There are connections that arrive like storms disguised as love. The empath feels seen, understood, chosen. But beneath that intensity lives something dangerous: emotional hunger. Certain people are drawn to your softness because they cannot create warmth inside themselves. So they borrow yours, again and again, until your spirit begins speaking in fatigue instead of joy. And then fate intervenes, not gently, sometimes through betrayal, sometimes through distance, sometimes through a silence so painful it feels supernatural. You call it heartbreak, but your soul calls it rescue, because not every attachment is sacred just because it felt deep. Some bonds exist only to teach the empath where their boundaries should have been born. The empath often mistakes emotional familiarity for destiny. That is the hidden wound. You recognize pain in others because pain recognizes itself in you. This is why toxic people can feel strangely familiar, almost magnetic. Jung believed we are drawn toward unfinished parts of ourselves. And some people arrive carrying the exact chaos your childhood normalized. Fate separates you because your nervous system keeps confusing suffering with connection. You try to heal people who secretly enjoy remaining broken. You try to love people who only know how to consume love. And every time you ignore your intuition, life becomes louder, until the universe finally whispers the sentence your soul feared most. You cannot save someone who feeds on your self-destruction. Have you noticed how empaths stay too long after the magic disappears? Not because they are weak, because they remember who the person was in the beginning. Empaths fall in love with potential, with hidden goodness, with fragments. But fate does not judge people by their potential. It judges patterns, and patterns reveal truth. The repeated disrespect, the subtle manipulation, the feeling that you must shrink to keep peace alive. Fate separates you when the relationship begins demanding your silence as payment for belonging. Because the empath was never created to become emotionally homeless inside someone else's shadow. Some separations happen even when love is real. That is the part nobody tells the empath. Two souls can care deeply for each other and still poison each other unconsciously. Timing matters. Healing matters. Awareness matters. Love alone cannot carry two unhealed nervous systems toward peace. So fate creates distance, not as punishment but as protection. Because sometimes the empath keeps trying to water a garden during a storm, not realizing both souls are drowning. And distance becomes the only language strong enough to interrupt the cycle. The tragedy is not always losing someone. Sometimes the tragedy is losing yourself while trying not to lose them. The empath senses endings before they arrive. That strange heaviness, the dreams, the anxiety with no visible cause. Your subconscious sees the emotional fracture long before reality catches up. Jung called this the language of the unconscious. Symbols, feelings, patterns, the soul speaking before the mind understands. But empaths often ignore these warnings because they fear abandonment more than exhaustion. So fate creates unavoidable separation. The truth surfaces, the mask falls, the illusion collapses, not because the universe hates you, because your soul can no longer survive inside the lie your heart keeps defending. There are people who only love the empath when the empath is wounded. They adore your patience, your forgiveness, your endless understanding. But the moment you begin healing, something shifts. Your light stops being easy to control. Your boundaries interrupt their access. Your silence stops feeding their ego, and suddenly they withdraw, become colder, more distant, more critical. This is not coincidence. Fate removes certain people because your healing threatens the role they assigned you. They wanted your empathy, not your evolution. And the moment you stop bleeding for them, the connection begins to die naturally. The empath carries ancestral loneliness, a feeling of being misunderstood even in crowded rooms. This is why certain toxic bonds feel impossible to leave. They temporarily numb the deeper fear of emotional isolation. But fate knows something your fear does not. Loneliness never destroys the empath as deeply as self-betrayal does. So the universe keeps separating you from people who require you to betray yourself to remain loved. Again and again, until you finally understand that peace is not found in being chosen by everyone. Peace begins when you stop abandoning your own spirit to avoid being abandoned by others. One of the hardest truths for the empath is realizing that not everyone who enters your life is meant to stay. Some souls arrive as mirrors. Others arrive as warnings. Others arrive to awaken the parts of you still sleeping beneath survival mode. The pain comes when you try turning temporary people into permanent homes. Fate separates you because your soul journey requires evolution, not emotional captivity. Every ending exposes something hidden. Your wounds, your patterns, your forgotten worth. And strangely, after enough loss, the empath begins noticing something beautiful. Every painful separation quietly returned them closer to themselves. One day, the empath stops chasing explanations, stops begging for clarity, stops trying to reopen doors fate already closed. And in that silence, something ancient awakens inside them. They realize the universe was never taking love away. It was removing noise, removing distractions, removing attachments that kept their soul trapped in emotional survival. Because fate does not separate empaths from certain people to punish them. It separates them so they can finally hear themselves again. Beneath the chaos, beneath the longing, beneath the fear of being alone. And when that moment arrives, the empath no longer asks, "Why did they leave?" They ask the deeper question, "Why did I ignore my soul every time it begged me to leave first?" There comes a moment when the empath notices a strange pattern. The more awakened you become, the fewer people can truly stay close to you. Not because you became cold, not because you stopped loving deeply, but because your energy stopped begging to be accepted. And that changes everything. People who once felt comfortable around your silence suddenly become uncomfortable around your truth. They preferred the version of you that overexplained, overgave, overforgave. The healed empath feels unfamiliar to those who benefited from their wounds. So fate creates distance naturally, because some connections survive only when you remain emotionally small. The empath often attracts people standing at emotional crossroads, souls searching for healing, validation, escape. You become the safe place they never had. But not everyone comes to stay forever. Some people arrive only to remember what warmth feels like before continuing their own journey. And this is why certain separations hurt beyond logic. Your soul remembers the depth, even when the connection was temporary. But fate understands something painful. Just because you changed someone's life does not mean they were meant to remain in yours. Some souls are lessons wrapped in intimacy. Carl Jung believed that whatever we avoid within ourselves eventually appears in our relationships. This is why the empath keeps meeting the same energy in different bodies, different face, different voice, same emotional wound underneath, until the lesson is finally learned. Fate separates you repeatedly because your soul refuses to evolve through comfort alone. Every ending exposes the hidden pattern, the fear of rejection, the addiction to fixing others, the habit of earning love through suffering. And each separation asks the same haunting question. When will you stop choosing people who require your self-abandonment? There are moments when the empath feels cursed in love and friendship. Everyone leaves. Everyone changes. Everyone disappears eventually. But what if the universe was not removing love from your life? What if it was filtering out energies unable to meet you where your soul is trying to go? Because empaths are not designed for shallow connections. Your spirit searches for emotional honesty instinctively. And people hiding from themselves can only stay near you for so long before your presence begins forcing them to confront what they buried inside. That is why some people run after becoming deeply seen by you. The empath carries an invisible mirror. Without trying, you reflect people back to themselves. Their wounds, their masks, their contradictions. Some people heal in your presence because of this. Others become defensive, distant, even cruel. Not because you harmed them, because your energy interrupted the illusion they built to survive. And fate notices when a connection becomes spiritually dangerous for you. The moment your compassion begins chaining you to someone else's darkness, separation starts unfolding quietly behind the scenes. The universe will shake your life before it allows your soul to decay slowly in the wrong hands. There is also a deeper loneliness empaths rarely speak about. The grief of realizing that many people love your light but cannot hold your depth. They enjoy your kindness until your emotions become inconvenient. They admire your empathy until you need empathy in return. This is why fate separates you from emotionally unavailable souls. Not because you are difficult to love, because your heart was never meant to survive on half-love disguised as connection. The empath suffers most when receiving crumbs from people they would have fed entirely. Sometimes fate removes people without explanation because explanations would keep you emotionally attached. If they betrayed you clearly, you would hate them. If they apologized honestly, you would stay. So life chooses ambiguity instead. Silence, distance, confusion, the unanswered ending. And strangely, this becomes part of your awakening. Because the empath eventually learns that closure does not always arrive through conversations. Sometimes closure arrives when your nervous system finally feels peace in their absence. Sometimes your body heals before your heart understands why the separation was necessary. The deeper the empath grows spiritually, the more sensitive you become to hidden energy. You begin sensing envy beneath compliments, manipulation beneath affection, emotional emptiness behind beautiful words. What once felt normal now feels unbearable. This is why old connections begin collapsing during periods of awakening. Your soul frequency changes. The mask no longer comforts you. Forced conversations exhaust you. Performative love becomes impossible to tolerate. Fate separates you from people whose presence once matched your wounds but no longer matches your healing. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all is this: the empath was never meant to carry everyone to the finish line. Some people must lose you in order to understand what you truly were. Some people only recognize sacred energy after it leaves their life forever. But the empath keeps moving forward. Softer, wiser, more discerning. No longer confusing attachment with destiny. No longer begging broken connections to survive. Because eventually you realize fate was never destroying your relationships. It was protecting the parts of your soul that love almost destroyed. The empath eventually grows tired of trying to decode every ending. You replay conversations at night, search for hidden meanings inside silence, wonder what you could have done differently. But fate rarely separates souls because of one mistake. It separates them because the connection slowly became a place where your spirit could no longer breathe. And empaths stay too long inside suffocating places because they confuse endurance with love. You think loyalty means remaining through every storm, but some storms arrive to show you which doors were never safe to live behind. Some people are chapters your soul keeps trying to reread, even after the story has already ended. There are people who enter your life carrying a hidden emptiness so deep that your energy becomes addictive to them. They feel calmer around you, more alive, more understood. But instead of healing themselves, they unconsciously begin feeding on your emotional presence. At first, the empath feels honored to help, needed, important, but over time, something strange happens. Your light grows dimmer while theirs grows stronger. Your exhaustion deepens while they continue taking without noticing. And fate intervenes before your soul completely forgets what it feels like to exist without carrying someone else's pain. The empath often believes every deep connection must have a permanent purpose. But depth does not guarantee destiny. Some souls touch your life only to awaken forgotten parts of you, to expose your wounds, to remind you what still needs healing. And when their role is complete, the separation begins naturally. Not because the connection was fake, because it fulfilled its purpose already. The tragedy comes when the empath keeps trying to extend temporary lessons into lifelong attachments. That is where suffering begins. Carl Jung once said that enlightenment comes not from imagining figures of light, but from making the darkness conscious. The empath learns this painfully through relationships. Every separation reveals another unconscious truth hiding beneath your love. The fear of abandonment, the need to rescue, the attraction toward emotionally unavailable people, the belief that suffering makes love more meaningful. Fate keeps separating you until these hidden patterns finally become visible, because what stays unconscious continues controlling your choices from the shadows. There is a sacred loneliness that begins appearing during the empath's awakening. Not the loneliness of being alone, the loneliness of no longer being able to tolerate false connections. Small talk feels heavier. Forced energy becomes unbearable. You start craving depth in a world addicted to distraction. And this is where many empaths become afraid, because healing changes your relationships faster than pain ever did. Suddenly, certain people stop calling. Some friendships fade quietly. Some bonds collapse the moment you stop overextending yourself. But this is not loss. This is alignment. The universe removes people who only understood the wounded version of you, the version that accepted crumbs, the version that apologized for existing, the version that carried everyone emotionally while secretly drowning alone. And when you begin honoring your intuition, many connections fall apart automatically, because your energy no longer invites manipulation. Your silence no longer tolerates disrespect. Your empathy no longer exists without boundaries. This is why healing feels lonely before it feels peaceful. The empath eventually realizes something heartbreaking. Many people loved the access they had to you more than they loved you. They loved your listening ear, your emotional availability, your softness, your forgiveness after every wound. But real love does not survive only when you are useful. Real love survives when you become honest, tired, human, complicated. And fate removes people who disappear the moment your soul stops performing emotional labor for them. Because those connections were transactions disguised as intimacy. There are endings that feel supernatural. People you thought would stay forever vanish almost overnight. Plans dissolve, futures disappear, and no explanation ever fully satisfies the ache left behind. But years later, the empath often looks back with trembling clarity. You finally see what your pain could not see at the time. The manipulation hidden inside charm. The imbalance hidden inside devotion. The exhaustion hidden inside loyalty. Fate did not ruin your life. It interrupted your destruction. And slowly, the empath stops mourning every separation. You begin understanding that not everyone lost was a loss. Some departures were divine protection wearing the face of heartbreak. Some closed doors saved your spirit from becoming trapped inside cycles your soul had already outgrown. You stop chasing people who are determined to misunderstand you. Stop shrinking yourself to maintain connection. Stop translating your soul into smaller words just to make others comfortable. Because the healed empath no longer fears losing people. The healed empath fears losing themselves. In the end, fate keeps separating empaths from certain people for one reason above all others. Your soul was never meant to remain where it is merely tolerated. You were never created to spend your life bleeding into people who only know how to take. The empath was created to awaken, to feel deeply without drowning, to love without self-erasure, to recognize that peace is holier than attachment. And one day, after enough painful endings, you finally stop asking why certain people disappeared from your life. Because the answer becomes painfully clear. Every person fate removed was standing between you and the version of yourself you were always meant to become. And maybe this message found you at the exact moment your soul needed to hear it. If you've ever felt fate pulling certain people out of your life, share your story in the comments. Your experience may help another empath feel less alone. Subscribe and stay close. There are some truths only sensitive souls are ready to understand. Thank you for watching.